Number 1. The Form. My first Christmas at college was sort of a lonely affair. I didn't have the money to go home and spend Christmas with my family, but the college allowed students to stay over in their dorm rooms during the holiday break. So I stayed in my room the entire 5 weeks between the 2 semesters. Not a lot of other students did this. This big, normally student-filled campus basically turned into a winter wasteland. You know, I actually had a lot of problems during this break. I have written about a few of them before, but I haven't written about this one yet. First, I was drinking a lot during this time, but I really didn't think too much about it. I was in college and I wasn't hurting anyone, so I just did it. I was drinking a lot too, and my drink of personal choice was vanilla vodka, and I can't count how many days and nights I walked down to the store in order to get it. On Christmas Eve, I was feeling very lonely, and I didn't really have much to drink. Not only that, I realized the liquor store would be closed on Christmas Day. I was surprised that, with so few students on campus, that the store was even open on Christmas Eve. I went walking to the store. Now, if any of you have ever been on a big campus or in a big city, when it didn't really have many people around, it's a very strange experience. You would be a little more wary of whatever or whomever you see around. When I walked into the store, I noticed that there was someone leaning up against the outside of the store. I was horrified, thinking it was a homeless man, especially because of how cold it was outside. I mean, the wind chill had to be below 0. I went into the store and got my stuff, and then when I came out, I looked back at the guy again. The side of the store was an alley that he was sitting in. I could tell that he was breathing, so he was alive. I wished I could do something for him. I felt bad for buying the vodka when I didn't really have money to give, and I could have given him some. I went walking home, but it wasn't long before I turned around and looked back at the store. I noticed that the guy on the side of the store had gotten up, and not only that, but he also began walking in the direction that I was walking in. And yeah, I got a little nervous then, especially when he crossed the street and was on the same side of the street as I was. I began wondering if he had done it on purpose because he was following me, and I couldn't think of any good reason to follow me. The walk back was not a short one, and I kept looking back at the guy as he made it obvious that he was following me. I didn't assume he was a student because he didn't look like one. He was padded in old and dirty clothes, which I had noticed when he was sitting against the store, and he smelled bad too. Anyway, he took every turn that I took, and the turns I took, they took me through campus to my dorm, so there was no doubt he was following me. Now, when we got close to the dorm, there was a small way I took to get there. I cut behind this building, walking on earth rather than sidewalk. There were also a few trees back there. Not the most ideal way to walk when someone was following you, but it cut a few minutes off of the walk. When I got through there, I was in more of an open spot. There was also a light right above as I got back onto the sidewalk. I turned to look back again at that point and saw the man again. This time I saw him in the light though, for really the first time. He was walking, a little arched over. He was wearing a Santa hat, and I noticed that he didn't have any hands. Both of his hands were hooks. In a normal situation, I would like to think that wouldn't bother me. I mean, I even once worked with a disabled guy who had 2 hooks for hands. But this situation was different. This guy was obviously following me, and he was swinging those hooks back and forth in what looked like an aggressive manner. Not knowing what else to do, I started running, and I ran as fast as I could, not even worried that I might slip on the ground because of the ice. I did almost fall forward a couple times, but thankfully I didn't, and I ran until I got back to the dorm. Taking out my card to open the door, I fumbled with it like any idiot from a horror movie. I think I realized then why people from horror movies fumbled with their keys, but did not stop to dwell on it. I got inside the door and quickly closed it behind me. Looking back, I noticed that man was out there, but he had stopped pursuing me. Instead, he was just standing there, a bit far away from the dorm entrance. He kept looking, and I kept watching him. And finally, he lifted one of his hooked hands, waved it at me, like he was telling me goodbye, and then turned and walked away. I never saw the hooked man again. I don't know if he was really trying to rob me or hurt me, or maybe if he was just screwing with me. I mean, the situation was really out there, and I could absolutely believe the man had been messing with me. I don't know, but it was terrifying when it happened. I went back into my dorm room and had a lot of vanilla vodka to celebrate that Christmas Eve.
Number 2. My uncle. This happened on Christmas Eve when I was 13 years old. I'm not going to list any names of places because I live in a different country and prefer to be anonymous. I had an uncle that long before I was born was suspected of killing 4 people quite brutally in a small house in the town my family lived. Even though he was found not guilty, it was really of the opinion of almost everyone that he was, in fact, guilty. So he became a bit of a bogeyman in the area, especially with the kids. Now, I didn't grow up in that town. This was my dad's side of the family. He moved away to go to school and settled down in the town that he went to school in, and we normally went with my mum's family for the holidays, although the occasional trip to my dad's family wasn't unheard of. This year, we went to my dad's family. I did always enjoy going there, especially because it was a rare thing. But on Christmas Eve, my parents needed something from the local market and sent me to get it. It was very cold outside, but that didn't bother me. It was quite dark outside, and that bothered me a little bit. But mostly, I was walking around in such an unknown town that bothered me the most. It was weird and creepy, and especially quiet outside due to everyone being home with their family. Now, I was familiar with the house that the murders took place in. My uncle was someone that I didn't know very well and had only met him on a few occasions and not for very long. And he wasn't at the Christmas celebration this year. Some older kids were walking around outside and saw me as I stopped at the market. After I walked out and went on my way home, they began following me. I wasn't really worried because even though they were older than me, they were just kids, and I had no reason to believe they were going to do anything bad. So I was walking down the street, and actually after a while heard the steps behind me speed up. I turned around and saw the 4 kids running towards me pretty quickly. I didn't know what to do, so I just stood there like an idiot. I had never been bullied before, so I didn't know or think anything like that was going to happen. When the kids got close to me, one of them pulled out a knife and demanded that I hand over all the money I had on me. Nowadays, I probably would have given the money over to them, but this time I was young and stubborn and determined not to. Instead, I walked slowly up to the 4 boys with a grin on my face, and a wonderful idea occurred to me. I think the boys were surprised I was actually approaching them. I stopped in front of one and asked, "Do you know who, insert uncle's name here, is?" "Yeah, of course," one of the boys replied. "And you know what he did to the family in the house?" They indeed did. "Well, he's my uncle. If you know what he did to them, can you imagine what he will do to you if you hurt me?" I had never seen anyone turn as pale as those 4 boys. They didn't hesitate, but turned around and took off down the streets. I assumed they believed me, because who would ever admit to being related to someone who had done something so awful?
Number 3. At the door. I used to be the manager of a small store that was actually in a pretty large shopping area. I don't want to go into too much detail about the store though, because although I don't work there anymore, they still exist. At the time, I was very often the closing manager of the store, and this year I volunteered to work on Christmas Eve. We were as busy as hell, but I always liked the busy days because they kept me really busy. We didn't close early, and we're actually open until 11 p.m. However, the moment we closed, I let the other employees go home for the last hour of Christmas Eve. I had nowhere to go really, so I went and I did the paperwork in the manager's office. After a while, I heard some sort of thumping that seemed to be coming from the front of the store. Wondering what was going on, I got up and went to look. I have to admit to being a little shocked when I saw a man fully dressed as Santa Claus standing at the front door of the store, and he kept thumping on the door. I slowly walked to the door, but I wasn't prepared to open it. I asked the man what I could do for him. "Let Santa in," he said slowly. "Let Santa in. It's Christmas." "I'm not letting you in," I told him. He seemed like he was drunk. I'd never seen a drunk Santa before, so it was even weirder than if he was just knocking on the window. "I want to come in," he told me. "It looks nice in there. And I bet you're going to be nice to me too." He paused for a moment, and when I didn't respond, he started beating harder on the door and demanding to be let in. Scared, I turned and ran to the office to call the police. I stayed in the office until they showed up, and the man was not at the store then. However, the police didn't even go and look for him, which I guess I understand. I mean, he didn't successfully break in or do anything but bang on the door. Fortunately, they walked me to my car, and one of them drove with me to my house. It was very nice because I kept expecting to see that Santa pop out of somewhere. I expected him to be in the back seat of my car, or maybe under my car, or maybe at my apartment. None of that happened, though. I was able to have a pretty decent Christmas, too, once I was able to shake off the nervousness of what had happened.
Number 4. Christmas Tree. I often liked when I would spend the holidays with my aunt. She always had a much nicer house than we did out in the country, and it was much cozier than our house. I always slept on the couch in the living room, which was great too. I always went to bed last, but never wanted to turn the tree lights out. This happened when I was 15. I remember it quite well. On Christmas Eve, everyone wanted to be a little earlier than usual, and I stayed up reading a book. The light from the Christmas lights was just enough for me to read the book without turning a lamp on. As I was reading, I looked up because I saw something move. I saw someone standing behind the Christmas tree. I jumped up, startled, and turned on the lamp. Looking back at the tree, I didn't see anyone standing behind it. I got up and looked around the rooms. There was only a moment, and whoever it was could not have gotten out from behind the tree, but there was no one in the house. I had a hard time getting to sleep that night. The following morning, I told everyone what I saw. None of them had ever seen a ghost or anything like that, but I knew what I had seen, and it wasn't Santa Claus.
Number 5. The dogs. I've been having a problem with one of my neighbors. It's been very, very irritating. I live in a neighborhood where people don't take very good care of their pets. I mean, there are all sorts of cats walking around. I name them because I see them all the time. I often even get them to come over and let me pet them. But I am a firm believer that cats should be indoor pets because they will lead longer, healthier, and happier lives. But this isn't about cats. Although the neighbors I am talking about do have cats. They like to sit in the middle of the road and wait to annoy car drivers. I kind of like that. The neighbors have a lot of animals. They even have a goat. But the most interesting thing is their dog. They have a ton of dogs. A few of them are actually wonderful. They will just fill you with joy if you see them. But they have these 2 dogs that I absolutely hate. and I will tell you the story of how I interacted with them. One day when I was walking to the store, I just walked down my driveway. I had been outside less than a minute when this medium-sized black dog came running out of their yard. I had never seen it before, and I never back away from dogs. This dog ran up to me, and as usual, I just kept walking, yet the dog ran right up to me and bit me right on the leg. I was surprised when the dog ran off. I didn't retaliate in any way, but I did confront the owners about it. I didn't want to call animal control because they would have put the dog down, and I didn't want the dog to be put down because it had bad owners. However, even telling them this, they didn't do anything. They wouldn't even give me a paper to show that the dog had been given his rabies shot. It was horrible. And worst of all, they did not begin putting the dog on a leash either. I grabbed this iron rod that had been sitting on my porch. I began carrying it around in my messenger bag in case the dog came at me again. And guess what? It did. It happened quite often, and the dog would always run at me, trying to corner me. And for the first time ever, I actually backed off from a dog. I was worried that I would get bitten again, so I swung the rod at the dog a few times, and eventually it went away. Now, I don't want to hear anything from dog lovers who think I was doing a bad thing here. This was a dog that I spared the life of several times. A friend of mine in this neighborhood had his own dog put down by the county, simply because it chased somebody without ever biting them. But every time this dog came after me, I never reported it because I didn't want it to be killed. So every time this dog came at me, I could have gotten it taken away, but I never did. So defending myself with a rod was completely justifiable in my mind. I mentioned my neighbors were odd, and there was always a new animal that was showing up. I told you about the goat, but there was the worst thing that happened. They got another aggressive dog. It was a larger black dog, and one day as usual, when I was out walking, both of the dogs came at me. I got really scared as they barked and growled and chased me. Like a moron, I hadn't brought the rod with me because I hadn't seen the dog in a few weeks. The two dogs were very scary and their barks were very angry. They chased me into someone's yard and then up against a fence. I was scared they were going to bite me, but then a car drove by and scared them away. I tried to find something else to protect myself with, and found something that I could carry with me whenever I left the house. I went to do my Christmas shopping one evening, not long ago actually. It was cold and a bit icy outside, but that was when I liked to do it. I hadn't seen the dogs in a while at this point. Right on the edge of the neighborhood, though, I heard the barking, and the two dogs came running out of the dark at me. I got scared and tried to move away but slipped and fell, and the smaller dog began growling and advanced on me. And right before it could bite me, there was this incredibly loud electric noise. The dog that was about to bite me lay on the ground whimpering. The bigger dog, terrified at the noise, turned and ran off. I slowly got up to my feet, wary of the dog that was laying on the ground. I hadn't wanted to hurt him, and I know his aggression was more the fault of his owner and not him, but I had bought the stun gun to protect myself, and it did. I haven't seen the dogs in the following days, and I wonder if they will leave me alone for now.
Number 6. The most terrifying Christmas ever. I remember looking forward to Christmas so much when I was 10 years old. Like every year prior, I made out such an interesting Christmas list. There were tons of toys and games I wanted to get. This was in the early 1980s, where there were so many toys and many of them were also interesting. Not only that, video games were making a comeback after the 1984 video game crash. Nintendo Entertainment System was on a roll, and there were so many things I wanted for Christmas. Don't get the impression, please, that I was a spoiled brat or anything. I enjoyed making Christmas lists, but I didn't want my parents to get me everything on it. I meant I wanted things, but I only got a few presents every year, so I appreciated each and every one of them. Also, sometimes making out the Christmas list is more about dreaming up things than actually receiving them. It's fun to imagine. So I was happy when Christmas morning came around. I got up and we went to have a nice breakfast. We always did right before opening gifts. My family really didn't do the Santa Claus thing, so the presents had been under the tree for a while. I often would lay on the floor, staring at the gifts and wondering what they were. And finally the moment came. It was time to open presents. Upon opening my first present, I found that it was a pair of pants. Well, that was okay. I always got at least one piece of clothing for Christmas, but it got worse. The second present was a flannel shirt. It was 10. Why was someone buying me a flannel shirt? And it had snaps instead of buttons. My third present was underwear. Not even fun underwear like underoos, plain white jockey shorts with red lines on the elastic. I began sweating as I reached for my fourth gift. I was expecting a kung fu video game which I had really desired. It was a notebook and pencil for school. This was it. There was only one present left. I knew it had to be a really great and expensive toy. That was the reason I had gotten the other gifts, because this was the ultimate toy. I had to begin to admit, I was scared as I opened the gift, and when I did, I felt chills run through my body. It was a pair of tap shoes. My family had signed me up for lessons. I felt lightheaded. This couldn't be happening. This was a Christmas without any toys. Such a thing didn't exist, did it? I mean, I didn't believe in the bogeyman or Dracula or Freddy Krueger, but I also didn't believe in a Christmas without toys. I screamed in terror. I jumped up and began to run away. However, I stopped for the notebook. It had a picture of Q*bert on it, so it was the closest thing I had for comfort. I ran into my bedroom and locked the door. I ran into my closet and locked that door too, and hoped and prayed the police will come. Surely they have to save me from the most terrifying Christmas anyone has ever had. I remember rocking back and forth on my knees. I don't know how many hours I was in the closet. Every noise scared me. I had no idea what to do or what would become of me. Then I heard something on my bedroom door. Footsteps began coming closer and closer to the closet. I realized that even though I locked both doors, they were easy to unlock from the outside. The locks were just for privacy. Something grabbed the closet door and hauled it open. Fearing the worst, I looked up. I breathed a sigh of relief. It was my parents with a brand new Nintendo. I was saved. I came out of the closet and went back to the Christmas tree and played Nintendo as the police arrived and arrested my parents.
Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas from me, my sister, all the cats, and our dog Buffy. And I want everyone to know that last story read by Mortis Media is completely fictional. I wrote that story myself as a joke. And I think my good friend Mortis really sold that story pretty good. I want to thank Mortis and wish him and his wonderful family a Merry Christmas. I hope everybody is doing great. If you celebrate Christmas, I hope you're having a great Christmas. And if you don't celebrate Christmas, I hope you're having a great day that just happens to take place on December 25th. But do me a favor, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night, and Merry Christmas.